After figuring out how to turn basic forms in perspective with the help of this body rotation practice, I felt ready to do in-depth anatomy studies. The mind works in mysterious ways, so I decided I'd start with the part of the body I dislike the most and get it out of the way. I took 15 days to study feet anatomy in detail, and just like before, took an exam at the end. In these 15 days, I went from being barely able to draw foot, like the monstrosity that is on the screen, to being mostly comfortable with drawing it from imagination in various perspectives and poses as shown in my exams. So without further ado, December 10, day 1 was more of a preparation day than of a study one. I gathered information, most of which were videos. I then made a rough plan of how I was going to practice. I didn't follow it to a T, but I think it was a case of discovering better options as I moved through it. Day 2. I watched some of the videos. I was definitely procrastinating out of fear. I looked for fonts and brushes so my nose would look nice and make me happy, but maybe 2 hours were a bit too much. Though the day was not full of wasted as I went on to actually studying and taking notes from the vids. I was mainly redrawing the infographics or the 3D models they showed in the videos. I note down the names, but I will not try to memorize them at all. One quick Google search gives you multiple infographics. The names are only important for communication, which I rarely partake in. I left that day's study at the bones since I was confused as to how to separate the muscles from the leg ones, and if there were any visually important feet muscles to draw at all. This is the start of a problem that keeps lingering on throughout the whole study. So as I've learned, body parts are actually connected to each other, and the head-to-toe order exists for a reason. I kept bothering myself with the thought of I should have started normally, and the suffering was definitely deserved. Day 3. I did study, but I forgot to take notes the day off. I drew the tendons, thinking, these won't be visible, but it will be nice to know about them to understand the movements better. They're in fact very visible. I was just being dumb. Day 4. The day before I forgot to take notes, and the day after I forgot to study altogether. I sacrificed a day to save my sleep schedule. Day 5. I realized I didn't actually know how some of the bones look like in detail, and that was hindering my understanding of the feet in general. I separated said bones in a 3D app and stared at them like a maniac. I also simplified the bones in the boxes and practiced drawing with them. As I mentioned, the study plan keeps changing as days pass. I thought of drawing from references, then drawing the anatomy parts inside. Day 6. I fell into a samsara and once again realized that I didn't actually know how some of the bones look like in detail. Then I handpicked a few cubes and drew feet inside them using the simplified boxes. My simplified boxes were lacking exact measurements to follow, leaving me very confused. So I tried figuring out the proportions of the bones too. I then drew them inside the 4 hand-picked cubes again, and completely messed up the directions so I couldn't even compare them. And I only realized this on day 7. After these comes the fitting anatomical parts inside the references practice. I gave up on drawing the references themselves because I couldn't find any suitable references. And here I'm going to vent a bit. Why does every search engine suck nowadays? Whenever you search for X reference on Pinterest, you'd get the wrong references. This is understandable, and to combat this, I've been accustomed to adding photo or real life to my search. But now, it doesn't work. If you add any of those words to your search, you get 0 results. How does this make any sense? They're actively blocking you from getting results if you use this tactic, which just completely annoyed me. I can't believe Google's search engine was a better one for once. Anyway, I drew the boxes on top of references, but not all of them. Just a few until I felt fulfilled enough and got bored. Day 8. I started my ultimate study practice, drawing the simplified feet boxes inside these cubes, and on top drawing the actual feet. Cubes in quotations because I first measured them from the body boxes, forgetting they were not built off of cubes, and when I found the way to draw the cubes by themselves, I got too lazy to draw them all again. I managed to only fix them for the exams, but if you want to know how to draw the cubes correctly, I explained it in the second half of this video. On my first batch, I already had a few glaring mistakes. One was that I drew the heel too high and fat, and the inward part looked wrong, but I still don't know the exact reason. I think it's because it's a bit hard connecting the arc with the outward part that had no arc and sits flat on the ground. Since everything went smoothly despite the mistakes, I attempted the next batch too. Things are expected to get harder on the bottom-up batches. I'm still not thinking in 3D forms, but rather 2D flat planes, so I struggle with connecting them. Day 9. Here I started using even more tricks and shortcuts like this footmark shape. I also started to use thinner brushes, and I apologize for that because it ended up making time-lapse look so bad. I finished 2 batches today as well. Day 10. I finished the last batch and post them for instant gratification. In my comment explaining how I made a mistake, I make yet another mistake. I say that since I started from the side view of the foot, these are just mirrored duplicates. But the foot isn't like the body or the torso. It has all 4 sides different from each other. So I in fact did not draw mirrored duplicates, but only half of what I needed to. If you ever feel bad about having asked a stupid question in your noob days, maybe you ask what brush do you use, and the brush in question turned out to be a basic hard round brush with no pressure opacity or size, and that keeps you up at night. Just remember that I exist, and I'm worse than you. Day 11. I went on to drawing the ones I missed before. As I mentioned earlier and in the diary, these cubes aren't really cubes, but I didn't fix them for this practice. I kept drawing with the faulty cubes. They didn't necessarily have wonky perspective, it was mainly the plane sizes that were faulty, so it didn't affect the study much. It just looks ugly. I finished 2 batches this day. Day 12. I do the rest 3 batches and finally I'm done with the bottom-up views. There's one more fault to my poor cubes. As I said before, I measured these cubes inside the boxes from the body rotation, but I hadn't rotated the body boxes by 22.5 degrees. Since it is a longer box, it actually makes sense to do that because you get more variation with it. But when you try to turn them into a cube, they start looking really similar to each other. So especially for these 2 batches, I basically drew the same thing twice. Day 13. I start doing the top-down views, and since we're actually drawing all the sides, here I only do 1 batch. My at the time thought is that these are way harder to do. My current thought is that they are a waste of time because the only thing that changes is the leg. I think doing contour lines would have been better, especially for situations like these. There isn't anything more I can add to it to elevate the flatness except contour lines, and I believe trying to add them would be good exercise too. But I thought of doing that only when writing the script, so I didn't try it out at all. I really need to sit down and standardize my study plan a little bit. Of course, it'll never be perfect, but a more thought out one will definitely help me. Day 14. In my notes, I cry about how tomorrow is the last day and I still have so much to do. This is because at first I wanted to restrict my studies into time frames, so I wouldn't be studying the same topic until I die. But now I think restricting with homeworks and practices is better. And I don't actually have much left to do. The only thing I need to do is note down the range of motion, which will take like 15 to 30 minutes. I think I forgot that I gave up on the randomized RAM and randomized boxes practice I thought of on the first day. I finished 2 batches this day, but I half-assed a lot. I also kind of gave up on drawing the boxes. I just scribbled some ellipses. Now that I'm looking back on these, I don't know why I didn't draw the toes themselves. I understand not drawing the nails, as I usually pretend they don't exist, but drawing the toes should have been a significant part of this practice. No. It is even more clear on these that contour lines should have been a part of this practice. I have no way of assessing whether I understand the 3D form of the feet or not by looking at these. I myself know that I did, even though it could have been improved upon. It's just that I should have showcased it, as is the point of the practice. I don't know if I would need contour lines on stuff like the torso though. There's much to show with the muscles and stuff anyway. Day 15. I finished the last batch and honestly have no idea what I'm talking about in the diary. The exams aren't included in the study period anyway. Day 16. Yeah, I forgot the RNG ROM practice was discarded. I just took some range of motion notes from a physical therapy video. Day 17. I'm kind of lost as to what to do at this point, as I didn't have a concrete plan of how I was going to practice things except the cubes practice. I drew some feet in action in the cubes, then remembered that I didn't get any artistic information. After I watched a few videos like the one from Cynics, I freehanded more random feet. Then I get kind of angry at something, but I remember nothing about it, so I guess it wasn't all that important. That part isn't bad. What's bad is that I draw the exact same foot I drew just before. I also try one more foot in pose in boxes practice and consider the study part finished. And as you might have noticed, we are at day 17. I promise I did not lie. I have an excuse ready. The first day was preparation and I missed day 4, so technically I get to say I studied for 15 days in total. Exam 1. Generally, the idea for exams is that I'll use a little to no reference. If I desperately need one, it has to be from my notes. One exam idea I was fully set on doing for every subject was a turnaround, so I quickly started one for the feet too. These are very straightforward. I do a rough sketch, line, draw over, and liquefy to get the consistency right, and finally do one more line layer. Since everything got messy during the consistency phase, I didn't want to bother with getting the leg cylinder consistent too, so I made it some sort of uncanny valley shape that stayed the same at all frames. However, as I mentioned several times, my problem with the feet lied under it. I decided to do one more turnaround from a bottom-up perspective. It is the same process as before, but this one is obviously going to be harder. I couldn't use the same leg shape trick for this one, which saddened me. I had to draw some sort of circular guide to keep them consistent because they kept moving around so much. The end result is, I got the consistency right, but I don't think it looks like the nicest foot out there. I also omitted lots of details, which made it look even more cheap. I should have at least kept this line that is separating the toes from the foot. It is only visible in one of the frames. These are my very first times doing turnarounds, so I'm learning new things as I go. At the time, I really had a hard time keeping bumps consistent, like the ones on the ankle. I'm not sure if I'd necessarily do a better job now either, and the foot kind of gets too long and too short at these frames. I don't really know if it's faulty or not, but it looks weird to me. After these, I'll be moving on to ROM animations. The plan was to use the ROM notes from earlier and animate them. That turned out to be kind of redundant to do and accomplished nothing. Eventually, I caught a brain on sale and decided to do ROM animations in boxes. I picked the bottom-up one since it is the harder one and I didn't want to do more work. I sketched all the 3 ROMs and realized that the front-facing angle might be a bit too awkward. I changed to a box that is looking farther away. It was the same box I used in the bottom-up turnaround, so I got one of the foot frames to use as a base too. After that, I sketched the extremes of each 3 motions. There isn't much to say about these because the process is exactly the same. I draw something, then keep moving it around until the whole animation looks consistent enough. Here, I think I learned a bit more about slowly changing the wrinkles so that they don't look too abrupt in the animation. However, one new thing about these is that I just kept polishing and polishing several times. I was going crazy. Even after all that, I can now notice new parts that are just glitching randomly. The third one of these I didn't polish as much because I was just done with everything. I didn't want to look at feet anymore, so I gave up halfway through fixing it and just cleaned the lines. I think I left the hardest one to the last 2, which was so unfortunate. It would look bad forever. My problem with this one was more about the perspective than the foot anatomy. But to be completely fair, both were the objective of this study, so I can't cop out with that excuse. That is why I already came up with a different excuse. So as I went through this study and continued to draw unrelated stuff after it, I realized that I might have been blinded as to how many naked feet I actually wanted to draw throughout my whole life due to doing Posmaniacs daily, which forces me to draw feet quite a lot, as it's just floating naked bodies. I feel like the next time I need to draw naked feet will be so long into the future that I will be much better due to other seemingly unrelated studies and practices and just the fruits of drawing more. I could probably continue to use the more socially accepted equivalent of drawing hands and pockets for feet, which is drawing them inside socks. That way, I would only need to draw the general shape of the foot, which can be practiced alongside forms in perspective. However, I still am glad I did feet first, because I got to test out this little study plan of mine with a part more simpler than the rest. If I were to do this particular animation today, I'd probably stop trying to find shortcuts and ways to rush the process, and just draw the full circles for the foot to turn around in. You can see in the time-lapse that I knew the method to drawing them properly, but just got lazy. Other things I should have done differently in a summary are: 1. Since feet don't have much detail, I should have used contour lines in the foot in boxes exercise to practice the form more in detail. 2. I also got rid of a lot of the natural detail I could be drawing due to laziness both in the foot in boxes practices and the animations. 3. I draw the toes too round. It makes it look almost comical. 4. I never drew the nails. They're ugly. As I mentioned lots of times, I felt that the turnarounds and the round animations weren't good enough exams. I don't think they fit as practice either, but they also just don't feel impactful enough to show off the skills I've developed, bad or good, at whatever level they're at. I've had other exam ideas. The first one was a round turnaround. I'll be straight up, I don't think I will ever attempt that. It is too scary and it will probably just turn out so bad that I will quit everything and go become a dishwasher in a nearby place. Another one is making an actual animation revolving around the subject. So for feet, it will be maybe a walking animation with the camera being focused on feet. This I see as doable, especially if I don't try to color it, but I think it's okay, and most of the time it's spent on coloring and shading, which has nothing to do with anatomy. Also, a piece is mostly evaluated with the general look of it, which will have nothing to do with the anatomy either. It's mostly about the composition and my taste in art. However, I didn't want to just leave this study like this, so I tried making a piece. And here it is, my cursed creation. Let me know if you want me to make his toes wiggle or feet sway. I will probably do it anyway. I drew these thumbnails in March without looking at anything too. I didn't mean to make it a no-reference challenge. I just ended up not needing anything. I'm sure if you look at it in detail, you will find obvious mistakes, but for the most part, I think they look good enough. So I guess I can say this study was in fact successful. And please do let me know if you have any ideas for an exam or what you think about the ones I already mentioned. I really need some opinions on this because I haven't been able to come to a decision.